A good view of the Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft docked to the Prichal module, which is the node module, a multi-hatched docking port for multiple vehicles at the Russian segment of the station. And now we're back inside Prichal at the hatchway to the Soyuz, as the crew is beginning to gather for final farewells before the Soyuz crew floats through the hatch and closes the hatch behind them to begin their pre-undocking preparations. And a view of Frank Rubio, soon to depart the International Space Station. Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin originally were scheduled to spend just 6 months on the station, but a coolant leak developed in their original Soyuz that brought them to the station, the Soyuz MS-22, back on December 14th last year, and a replacement Soyuz was launched unpiloted and automatically docked to the station. That's the Soyuz MS-23 that they'll be returning home in a short time from now. Once this farewell opportunity is concluded, Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin will float inside the Soyuz, and Kononenko will begin the process of closing the hatch on the Prichal module side of the docking interface. The Soyuz hatch will be closed, and the Soyuz crew, the departing crew, will begin to don their Sokol launch and entry suits. And with the photo fest now having been completed, final handshakes between the crew members. And we'll be seeing Prokopyev, Petelin, and Rubio enter the Soyuz vehicle momentarily. Sergei Prokopyev entering the Soyuz with his crewmates. They are entering into the upper section of the Soyuz called the orbital module, which is basically designed to provide the crew members a bit of space before they move into the center section, which is the descent module of the spacecraft. The station hatch will be closed first, followed by the Soyuz hatch, and that will initiate the start of leak checks over the course of an orbit or so, to make sure that we have an airtight seal between the two docking interfaces before the depressurization of the passageway is conducted. Undocking scheduled at 2:54 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time, 3:54 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. There will be an undocking command to begin the process of opening the hooks holding the Soyuz to the Prichal module docking port. That takes about 90 seconds to complete before the springs push off on both sides of the docking interface to initiate the physical separation of the vehicle. At the time of undocking, Expedition 69 will come to an end. Expedition 70 formally begins. And there goes the hatch on the Prichal module side of the docking interface.
S4 and S6 are no longer illuminated. Copy.
And the hatch closed on the Prichal module at 11:38 p.m. Central Time, 12:38 a.m. Eastern Time. Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitri Petelin are now inside their return craft, the Soyuz MS-23. The hatch on the station side, the Prichal module hatch, has been closed. The three departing crew members will be closing the Soyuz hatch momentarily, having bid farewell to their crewmates and to their home that they have lived in for over a year, returning home this morning after 371 days in space, the third longest spaceflight in human spaceflight history. A good view of the three-sectioned Soyuz spacecraft. At the very top of your screen is the instrumentation and propulsion module with the solar arrays deployed. The center section is where the crew is strapped into their seats. That's the descent module, the only component that survives the heat of re-entry to bring the crew home. And at the very top of the Soyuz, mated still for another couple of minutes to the Prichal module, that's the orbital module. Once physical separation occurs, the thrusters on the Soyuz will fire in two separate separation burns to open a separation rate from the International Space Station to an ultimate distance of about 90 miles from the station for the deorbit burn later this morning. Undocking confirmed. Physical separation confirmed at 2:54 a.m. Central Time, 3:54 a.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station flew over southeastern Mongolia. Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitri Petelin have departed the complex that has been their home for over a year.
Unintelligible.
Next up, in about 2.5 minutes, the first separation burn to increase the opening rate between the Soyuz and the station. That'll be an 8-second burn of the Soyuz engines with an opening rate of about 0.53 meters per second.
Inaudible. Yes, we send the command, but inaudible, both from the control panel. And the indicator is no longer illuminated.
A very smooth, clean separation by the Soyuz MS-23, a great view as it flies over Mongolia. On board, Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitri Petelin, wrapping up 371 days in space and the third longest spaceflight in human history.
Firing in manual mode.
At this point, the crew will have a bit of free time as they prepare for the deorbit burn and their ultimate descent back into the Earth's atmosphere.
So how is it going? Well, it's not the first time. Well, it's going even better.
Good view of the departing Soyuz. Sergei Prokopyev reporting that the crew is feeling well. Everything in good shape on board the MS-23. This spacecraft was launched back in February, unpiloted, made an automated docking to the International Space Station as the replacement for the damaged Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that incurred a coolant leak back in December of last year, rendering it unusable for the crew to return to Earth in. As the Soyuz undocked from the International Space Station, the NASA and Russian landing team, embedded with the Rosaviatsa search and recovery forces, are taking a breather at the airport in Kazakhstan, which is the intermediary staging site. The NASA Russian landing team flew by helicopters from Karaganda to Kazakhstan a couple of hours ago. Those helicopters have been refueled and will take off in sequential fashion for the landing site to recover Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin. The helos will be wheels up around the time of the deorbit burn. which again is scheduled at 5:24 and 9 seconds a.m. Central Time, 6:24 and 9 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. And there's our first view of the Soyuz MS-23 under the chutes. 6 minutes until touchdown. This video is courtesy of Roscosmos. Soyuz descending at its normal rate of descent. Search and recovery forces are reporting back that everything is looking good from their perspective.
Prepare. 100 meters to ground.
100 meters to go. The crew being told to brace for touchdown.
Object getting close to touchdown. Object
touchdown. Touchdown confirmed at 6:17 a.m. Central Time. Rubio's record ride comes to an end as he, Prokopyev, and Petelin return to Earth after a 371-day, 157 million-mile journey at the International Space Station. And this video now, courtesy of Roscosmos, showing Soyuz commander Sergei Prokopyev having been helped out of the Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft. The crew home after 371 days in space, the third longest space flight in history, and of course for Frank Rubio, the longest single space flight by an American astronaut.
easy, easy. Check the arm. Check the cables. Careful. Easy.
Frank Rubio, the U.S. record holder for the longest single space flight in history, back on Earth.
Here you are. Don't fall. Very nice to see you. So great. We're all here. All went well.
Great, thank you.
Great,
It's good to be back.
you were the doctor on the crew, mate. How is in the space? How is your mate?
Fantastic. Yeah, everybody did really well.
You look very well.
Thank
very
you.
well.
Thank you. It's good to be home.
Thank you.
Once again, the view from the landing site, right by the Soyuz MS-23. Frank Rubio on the left, Sergei Prokopyev on the right.
Check the arm on the right side.
And Dmitri Petelin now being removed from the Soyuz spacecraft.
Easy, easy here. Turn. Legs. Turn back. Little higher. Move him a bit higher.
And a view of the Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft that touched down 28 minutes ago at 6 3:17 a.m. Central Time.
Yeah, drink a little bit.
The 3 crew members will be carried in those chairs into a nearby inflatable medical tent to doff their Sokol launch and entry suits, get into more comfortable flight clothing, and then they'll be transported in those ATVs to 3 awaiting Russian Mi-8 helicopters to take off for a 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Karaganda to the northeast of the landing site.
Soyuz didn't get any bigger.
Oh, really?
And Sergei.
And Dmitri Petelin, who was board engineer number 1, he and Prokopyev conducted 6 spacewalks during their time on board the International Space Station.
Mode. Thank you. Let's move it a little bit closer. Closer to the center. Dmitri. Photo. Please stand in the back.
Those Matryoshka dolls bearing the images of each of the 3 crew members being presented to them by members of the search and recovery forces.
I'm taking pictures of everybody. Oh, perfect. Very good. Pick up the blanket.
Prokopyev, thumbs up, being moved toward that medical tent. As we mentioned, the crew members were quickly extracted from the Soyuz MS-23 that landed on time, on target, and are now being brought into the nearby medical tent. And there's a view of Frank Rubio with Joe Acaba and the rest of the NASA team helping bring him into the medical tent. In the back, you see ISS program manager Joel Montalbano. The crew will get out of those Sokol launch and entry suits. They'll put on comfortable flight clothing and prepare for their helicopter flight back to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, and eventually their trip back to their respective hometowns. Rubio coming to Houston, Prokopyev and Petelin coming to Star City, Russia. So with that, the crew is now back in the medical tent. Medical exams in store for them as they have landed after more than a year in space, the 3rd longest space flight in history, a successful end to an eventful mission that was extended by 6 months, but ended in great fashion with a bullseye touchdown on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, Dmitri Petelin, safely back on Earth.